righty. I'd like to call the January Board of Regents meeting to order. As a reminder, this meeting will be held as a committee of the whole. Therefore, all members will vote on each recommended motion. Our system representative colleagues who serve on the standing committees may also vote on matters that usually come before the committees that they serve on. As always, our meeting is currently being live streamed, so please remain on mute unless you need to speak. Let's have the roll call, Mr. Ring.
Regent Davi.
Here.
Regent Ewing.
He's here.
Regent Finley.
Here.
Regent Jackson.
Here.
Regent Levy.
Here.
Regent May.
Here.
Regent McDonald.
Here.
Regent Meir.
Present.
Regent Perez.
I'm here.
Regent Pryor.
I'm here.
Regent Seal.
Richard Pryor is not here.
Regent Seal.
I wish he would.
Regent Solomon.
Here.
Regent Sterling. Regent
Here.
Sterling.
Here.
Regent Temple.
Here.
Regent Wild.
Here.
Regent Williams Brown.
Richard Pryor.
She is here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you so much. Our certification of inability to operate due to lack of in-person quorum is posted on our website and was distributed with our notice of meetings. Next item is public comments. Public comments can be made during today's meeting via open conference call at 888-204-5984, code 175-5460 #. You got that, son? All right, good. That information is in the notice of meeting posted on the Regents website at regents.la.gov. Any public comments received will be read during the meeting. Do we have any thus far, Doreen?
You do not have.
All right, thank you so much. Now we're on to oaths of office. Our next order of business is a swearing in of our officers to be followed by our executive committee members who are here in person and joining us by Zoom. Chair Collis Tipple III, Vice Chair Gary Solomon Jr., Secretary Sonia Perez. Please stand and I will ask Robin Lively, our counsel from LOSPA, to administer the oaths of office for the board officers.
You doing double duty today too, huh?
If y'all could raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Robert Sanders,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
and the Constitution and laws of this state,
the Constitution and laws of this state,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as state office,
and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as chair,
according to the best of my ability and understanding, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability and understanding, so help me God. Thank you.
Congrats.
We're smiling and we have.
Yes.
masks.
Yeah, no, we're all smiling. Melissa, do you want one with Collis and his wife?
One without the mask, y'all.
Already.
Y'all okay?
A nice one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, one without.
Yeah.
There we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Go to get me?
Yeah.
You know, she just jumped in front of everybody. First picture.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Very nice.
Thank
You
you.
want to honor this one is all purpose right here.
Wow. And I still have a speaking role for a little bit. Congrats again. We now have, I think you're the tallest chair in the history of the Board of Regents. We will now move to installation of our executive committee members. Will Regent Seal, Regent Pryor, Regent Weil, please join me in person and by Zoom to be sworn in as members of the executive committee. And so Regent Weil and Regent Pryor, please unmute. Ready to rock?
Yes.
Yeah.
I state your name.
I, Blake Bowden,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
Laws of the United States.
laws of this state,
the Constitution
Laws of the state.
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and I will
I
faithfully
will partially discharge
and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a member of the executive committee
perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a member of the executive committee
of the executive committee
according to the best of my ability and understanding, so help me God.
according to the best
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Guys, picture pages.
We're gonna take a photo.
Okay.
You think, Colin? Come on.
Come on, Collis.
We already have the.
She get in the middle, then we can even it out. No,
Yeah.
I just hold my breath.
Just don't breathe.
Ready, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty. Regent Seal and I will both sign the oath of office given to Doreen before leaving today, and Regents Weil and Pryor. I saw the emails. We'll take the oath of local notary and return to Doreen as well. Very sadly, giving up this gavel. I'm happy to give the chairmanship to you, but the gavel, I really.
We need to get you a gavel.
At this time, I'm officially turning this gavel over to our new chair, Colin Temple. Congrats, my friend.
Appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
We're gonna take another picture before we leave, because I was wearing.
Okay,
I am
Yes.
sick.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Blake. I can't tell you how grateful I am for you. Obviously your service to the Board of Regents, but the friendship that we have built. We've got the best dressed of all time going out. He's representing with the socks on. You with me?
My Regent socks, baby.
That's what I'm saying. Regent socks. Regent socks. So you obviously have set a very high bar. Now, the reality, man, I didn't write anything about your attire. They said that.
Oh, I didn't
gonna
even
say
see that was there.
I was going to say that. I was actually going to say it, and they already had it in there. So first and foremost, everybody,
Thank you, Colin.
thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, man. We've actually built a great relationship that was outside of just this. You've done an amazing job in your service.
And
to
I
the
must
board.
say, you've outdone yourself today. This is.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that we should stand and applaud.
I totally agree.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure of my life doing this. I absolutely loved every second of it.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Well,
And I'm not going anywhere.
I'm about to say, you're not going anywhere, so
Thank
we
you so much.
appreciate it. Yes, let me knock that out. Okay. Miss Doreen is on it. Oh, this is a brand new pen up here.
You're watching?
And down here.
If you go. You already have.
Yeah, I did it. I did it. Thank you. All right. So, members, first and foremost, I look forward to serving you as chair, continuing the collaborative work of this board so that we can ensure that Louisiana prospers as we keep our focus on the students. I'm going into my seventh year as going into eighth year as a member of the Board of Regents. And as I reiterate the same thing I talked about with Blake, the relationships have been amazing, but going from being asked about joining the Board of Regents and quite honestly having to look at Google very quickly to find out what I was saying yes to to really understanding the all the dynamics involved and the basically work that goes done without anyone knowing, and how necessary it is. It's just been an amazing experience over these last 7 years. And I'm very proud of the work of higher education in adopting our rapidly changing environment to continue our mission of talent development. And, you know, whenever I do get off of this board, one of the things that I will remember very, very highly is that I was on the board when we brought Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid back to Louisiana, and the changes that I have witnessed taking place over these last couple of years. Fortunately, we have a governor who is also extremely supportive of higher education and what we're wanting to accomplish and what we want to do. Our campuses, our system, our staff, and our boards have risen to all the challenges of 2020, 2021, whether it was hurricanes, ice storms, pandemics, social unrest, racial unrest, all the different things that went on. And Regents has got it done, guys, with our system and campus partners, and then just the consistent commitment to students and making sure that we delivered some value. In the coming year, I'd like to continue to focus on dual enrollment. Guys, it's really amazing where dual enrollment is. The first day, I remember meeting with then Commissioner Rallo. I walked in and I said, I'd like to talk to you about something that's really important to me, and it was dual enrollment. And I set meetings up with he and a couple of high school principals and the governor about dual enrollment within the first month of me being on the board. And for my last meeting before I was kind of re-upped, for us to have a in-place dual enrollment program. And now with what's happening with dual enrollment, very, very, very exciting stuff. At the end of the day, getting college to more of our high school students, and for them to have the belief that they're worthy, that they're capable of being college students, whatever that path may be, right? Whatever that higher education path may be, is something I'm very passionate about, very excited about. Continuing dual enrollment work with the launch of the online portal later this month is going to be vital to help and continue to expand that opportunity, and excited to keep that initiative going strong. I'm also passionate because what it does is, it erases the belief gaps. Am I capable? Right? I mean, because if someone doesn't have an example in front of them of someone that's done it before, then sometimes there's going to be that question in their mind, right? There was never that question for me. For most of you, that question probably did not exist. But there are a lot of those that don't necessarily have it, and I'm excited that we'll be able to do that. Also committed to equity and providing educational access to all, no matter race, place, zip code, and I'm excited about the fact that we're championing that as a board. We all know without addressing longstanding and providing equity gaps, making post-secondary education affordable and accessible to underserved student populations, our master plan attainment goal cannot be reached, you all. So we've got to touch as many people as we possibly can, and I'm excited about that. Finally, another priority is taking the baton from our great past chair and continuing our business engagement efforts. We had an absolutely amazing meeting with Lobby. That was something that Blake was big on. I'm also very big on it, and I'm so excited that we were able to kind of get things kicked off with Blake. And then just having those collaborative conversations with business and industry about their workforce needs and how we can deliver a better product to them. And in doing so, putting our state in a position where you have value-adding folks, but also people that are capable and able to pay taxes and add to the bottom line of the state, So we'll focus on recruiting business talent development champions and working alongside them to ensure our graduates and completers are workforce ready. And I'd like to thank each of you for the work that you have done over the last year. Obviously, Blake, thank you again. I look forward to an absolutely great 2022 and serving with each of you all. So I'd like to continue the tradition by turning it over to our student board member, Mr. Cameron Jackson, for an update on student activities across the state. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. So pretty much we know everybody was on Christmas break for the past 2 weeks. Everybody is currently moving back in. As far as anything that's going on with what we have with the cost board, and especially the governor's task force, we're actually waiting on our reports to come in for January 8th. So we had set our last meeting for December 12th, had the nice little get-together gathering meeting with just like, I guess, I don't want to say like upper members, but like part of those upper members. And then we was just basically trying to make sure that we had everything going so that we can hop into the new year. We are going to Washington, D.C. January 26th. So as far as January updates, that's the most that we can give you until we get those data reports back. And then also getting those numbers back of people who are moving back into campus and seeing how we can navigate through this new wave, so to say, and reaching our students in every portion possible.
Thank you, Regent Jackson. So we appreciate your perspective, obviously, always, and the consistent contributions that you're making, man. And look forward to the next couple months, man. So moving to our next item, ratification of committee assignments. Members, I've updated your committee assignments for the year. Thanks to a collaborative effort with Regent Seal and Regent Solomon, and also an amazing effort and just Miss Doreen, you are on your game. I got to give it up. I mean, she is going to definitely get you whatever information that you need on time, ahead of time, overtime. So we appreciate you. So please take a look at your assignments in your packets. Regents, I certainly appreciate all of you who serve, and especially those who have agreed to serve as chairs and vice chairs this year. Are there any questions, anybody, about any of the assignments or any of the spots or positions? Okay, so if there are no questions, can I get a motion to ratify the 2022 committee assignments?
So moved.
All right, motion made by Regent Seal, second by Regent Perez. And any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. The committees and assignments will be updated on all relevant board materials and will be in effect for next month's board meeting. Members, you've received the board a copy of the December 15th, 2021 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December board meeting? Motion made by Regent Solomon, second by Regent, was that Pryor?
Or McDonald, yep.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. I love how quick this is. I'm trying to be like you, brother. I'm trying to be like you. Our next agenda item is reports and recommendations. We'll begin with legislative. Ms. Erin Kauser, Assistant Commissioner for Legislative and External Affairs, will present these items.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Kauser.
Congratulations, Chair Temple and your fellow members of the Executive Committee. Thank you so much. We're going to start today with a quick update on all of the legislative reports that staff has been working on. These are the reports that stem from the 2021 legislative session. You'll note that there are three checks that are orange. Those are reports that you are going to receive presentations on later today. So wanted to let you know that there's a lot of research and information that goes into these reports. And if we slide to the next screen, they are in addition to the annual reports that Board of Regents is responsible for every year. So this year we had a total of 19 reports that have come forward. 3 of the new reports from 2021 will convert to annual reports, and next year we'll be starting out with a base of 12 annual reports, plus any that come forward during the 2022 session that starts in March. Next screen. Wanted to share with you just some big picture ideas of the items that Dr. Reed has as our priorities for the upcoming session. Of course, first and foremost is strategic reinvestment in higher education, so that we can work to make sure that the funding is there, that we can keep the momentum going forward. The universal transferability is an exciting new piece that Deputy Deputy Denley is helping to work with, and this is to make it so that all courses where students have earned an educational attainment will be able to be honored and respected, no matter whether they're at a 2-year school, a 4-year school, if they're transferring in from the military, etc. So excited to be doing some work in that realm. There is also going to be an emphasis on trying to attain nursing and teacher workforce solution. We're going to be working alongside DOE, if I'm understanding correctly, to look at some ways to explore some retirement options within certain parameters so that we can hopefully get some additional nurses and teachers back into the workforce. Obviously, post-IDA, campus resiliency is a huge item. We are going to be looking to fortify our campuses. Assessments have already begun so that we can make sure that our campuses are hardened and able to withstand anything going forward. And we're going to be looking at the possibility of a pilot that involves campuses serving as recovery hubs. We know that our campuses are partners with their local communities that they serve, and can do so in great ways in the aftermath of events. So we are looking at putting some details in place to make sure that that can be taken care of before disaster strikes, so that they're ready to ramp up and go immediately afterward. We will be seeking, and you'll hear a little bit more about this just right after I finish talking, some tweaks to the reporting that is required from all of the wonderful power-based violence legislation. Nothing that's going to change the content of the reporting, but possibly requesting some alignment for the timelines so that information is not having to be reported multiple times just with different formats. So we will be working on that. And then TOPS updates. Once again, we will be codifying changes that were made with respect to COVID, and also looking at making a change involving foster youth. So those are the main priorities. Welcome any questions that you may have, and feel free to reach out to me, even if not during the board meeting. If we can go to the next screen. Every year we have an official motion that asks you all to grant the commissioner and the board chair the authority to finalize the 22 legislative agenda and to act on legislation as needed as we prepare for and work through the upcoming legislative session. So with that, there you go, sir.
Thank you. Members, you have heard the recommendations. Is there a motion to grant authority to the commissioner and board chair to finalize the 2022 legislative agenda and act on legislation as necessary?
So moved.
Regent Perez, second by Regent Seal. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. And as Ms. Kaiser just mentioned, we're on to our next thing, which is the power-based violence reports update to be presented by Dr. Allison Smith, Assistant Commissioner for Student Health and Wellness. Dr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Temple. Good morning, Regents. I would like to start by giving you a brief overview of where we are on the power-based violence implementation from fall of 2021 through the passage of Act 472 by Representative Freeman, Act 439 by Senator Mizell, Act 447 by Representative Reiser, and Act 441 by Senator Barrow. These are all legislations that have largely framed the policy, the new uniform policy on power-based violence, which you all passed in a special board meeting on August 10th. The commissioner was very eager to get started training our workforce, all of our responsible employees, our campus leadership, our system leadership on new policies, so to ensure that we're creating safe communities for our students, faculty, and staff to work in. Our uniform policy, as stated, was adopted on August 10th. And shortly thereafter, all campuses and systems adopted their own policies, with the system adoption coming first by mid-October, followed by institutional policies that came, and all policies were forwarded to the Board of Regents by December 15th. Next, for our training update, we have done a lot of training since June 29th when the laws became enacted. Some of you all have attended our major two-day trainings we had in August. On August 17th, we provided training to all board and system leadership, system councils, and system Title IX representatives. And then the following day, we provided training to all campus teams, including campus leadership, Title IX advisors, representatives from athletics, campus law enforcement, student affairs leaders. We provided training to be able to update all of our campus staff on the new policy that was passed. And as they began to shape their policy, all of our training was provided by the same firm that helped work with expert firms to work with to craft our policy on power-based violence, which was Nelson Mullins LLP. They have been amazing throughout this process, working with our office and our systems in crafting a policy that understands the intent and the heart of the legislature in putting student safety first. And so to date, we've been able to train over 500 members between campus and board leadership. We are continuing to train. We've also partnered with the Louisiana Office of the Attorney General and the Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault to provide training for confidential advisors. Those are persons that are designated to provide additional secure support for those who may be reporting incidences of power-based violence. If we could go to the next slide. For administrative reporting, there was significant administrative reporting requirements in the new legislation that was passed, as well as our policies. All systems, all campuses, systems, and boards were able to roll up their required information and report that to the Board of Regents, which you have received in your materials, which we will post publicly on our website as required by law. It also talks about number of reported instances of power-based violence, the gender, it gives gender of the complainant, of the respondent, and it gives some tracking information so that everyone can say that they were in the know. That initial reporting was due on October 5th or on October 14th. It was rolled up from the Title IX coordinator on October 10th. It was due from the Title IX coordinator on the campus, where it went to the campus president. And then the campus president rolled that up to system presidents, and the system presidents compiled a composite and presented that to their board. And all of those reportings have been forwarded to the Board of Regents and will be available on our website in a system-wide report, a statewide data composite report that you have in your packet. One of the next issues is the MOUs. Traditionally, from the 2015 legislation for campus security, all campuses were required to establish an MOU with all jurisdictional criminal justice and law enforcement agencies. What changed with the new legislation in our new policy is that now law enforcement is required to sign that MOU. And so as we're at the point where all of our campuses have done everything on their end to receive signatures for their MOUs, we have Southern University system and the University of Louisiana system reporting 100% completion on with obtained signatures for their MOUs. We are awaiting additional signatures for campuses located in the LCTCS system, as well as the LSU system. But the campuses have done everything that they need to require a signature from law enforcement. They are just awaiting those signatures. Next slide. So for our data publications, the first data publication that was due was the campus security reporting under Representative Reiser's bill, Act 447. That entailed publishing campus crime statistics at a minimum of categories that were contained in the Gene Cleary report. You may be familiar with the Cleary report. That's all campuses are required to post those in their annual security report due October 1st every year. The Reiser reporting, it calls for those minimum same categories to be reported within a more recent time frame. So that's one of the differences there. That report was received from and posted from all of the institutions, and that was verified by Regents. That is a compliance measure for Regents. If any school fails to post that, it is due April 10th and October 10th. If any school fails to post that, it is the Board of Regents' duty to notify the State Bond Commission and the Senate and House Education Committees so that school will not be allowed to borrow capital debt for 2 years. And so that is a compliance check that Regents verified that all of those publications were made available. One of the things Aaron's mentioned, which will tie into some of the legislative response fees, is that the next thing that is due is the sex crimes data report under Representative Freeman's bill, Act 472. That is due February 15th, which requires the reporting of all the things that were required in the Representative Riser report, plus a few additional categories that could consider power-based violence. Additionally, another piece the systems in our office has begun to work on is planning for the spring 2023 of the campus climate survey. That will be the next iteration of the climate survey. We will begin having work groups soon to plan and meet with constituent groups to see how do we best provide an instrument that allows the gauge for the accurate information, so that we're able to take that data and implement amazing solutions to keep our students safe and enjoyable throughout their time on campus. And for our legislative response, we are required by Act 472 to present a report to the legislature, including the governor, the House and Senate Education Committees, as well as we are understanding that the importance of that. We have decided also working very closely with the Senate Select Committee on Women and Children, who have been amazing and responsive partners in this, to present a report to them on January 15th in each year, detailing all that we have done and the progress that we have made. And so with that, the senior staff recommendation is that the board receive the legislative response to Act 472 of the 2021 regular legislative session and authorize Regents to submit this report on behalf of the board to the governor, the president of the Senate, the speaker of the House of Representatives, the Senate Education Committee, and the House Committee on Education, as well as Senate Select Committee on Women and Children.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Smith. So members, you've heard the recommendations. Is there a motion to receive and submit this report?
So moved.
All right. Motion made by Regent David, second by
I'll second.
Regent Perez. All right. So we'll signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? You got a question? All right, go ahead. Definitely.
So my question is on the Appendix H, the reporting, the summary of the data report on power-based violence. Just curious, on the annual training, how do we exceed the goal of 100% and achieve 146%? Like, what is the goal, I guess, and how do you actually get to 143 or 146% trained?
Yes, that is in an updated form that we will be providing to you all after the meeting. We exceeded the number of participants that we invited for the training. So campuses were invited to send an 8-person team. We ended up moving virtual on August 18th. Due to the rise of the Delta variant, campuses were able to send more than their 8 people. And so from our invited number, campuses had an overwhelming response of people that they wanted to send to be trained as it became more accessible due to it being virtual in nature.
Are they folks that were not, like if it says we're training systems and campus leadership, were we ultimately training people that were all the leaders, but also you're saying folks that maybe were a rung down that were not necessarily leadership as well?
For instance, let's say one campus, we had a composition for campus team. It may have been one representative from athletics. They may have sent 2. And they were all typically senior administration on the campuses.
Gotcha. And how about the responsible employee training? I know it's not due until fall 2022, but what is the goal? We're at 3.4% right now. We've got plenty of time, obviously, before the fall. What's the total number of participants that we're aiming for there who are considered responsible employees?
So we are aiming for 100%. As of now, under the new law, all employees of campus of our higher education system, including boards, are considered responsible employees. That new training that Regents was required to develop by January 1st, that training is now available on our website for the general public to view. It was created by Nelson Mullins, LLP, in consultation with the Louisiana Office of the Attorney General and the Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault. We will be providing the training files to the systems within the next week so that their system presidents will be able to record a special message to put at the front. And then their campus Title IX coordinator, they will be able to put campus specific Title IX information, like where the office is located, where can you report online, where can you report anonymously, who's the confidential advisors. The campuses will be able to record a short video. They will have the system president's message on the front, the training content in the middle, followed by their campus specific information. And when they will take it through their courses, their systems learning management system. So whether that's Moodle, Blackboard, or Canvas, and once they complete it through there, they will be able to get credit for completion and get a certificate the same way we do with other mandatory statewide trainings.
And one more question, Dr. Smith, apologies for hogging the mic.
No problem.
On the recording of the 5 formal complaints on power-based violence that resulted in discipline or corrective action, I noticed that none of them resulted in suspension or expulsion. Can you describe what other kind of corrective action or discipline might be taken that presumably is not expulsion or suspension in the event that you have a complaint that's followed up and requires action?
Yes, so it may be something, and what is unique about our policy is that it is a dual policy. So we have a Board of Regents uniform policy on power-based violence, as well as we have the dual accompanying Title IX grievance procedures. Under Title IX, there is a very narrow set of what is considered Title IX conduct, but the power-based violence allows for us to be more expansive in the way we respond. And one of the ways we're able to do that is that we have a process, we allow for an informal resolution process. And so that may be where students may meet in mediation, where they may agree to no conduct, or the complainant might just want an apology, or perhaps the respondent agrees to sensitivity training, internet safety, or a lot of times it may be an apology that the complainant wanted. So there are ways to have informal resolutions that do not, if the complainant feels that or looking at student codes of conduct or their policies, of a certain level of behavior is not warranted. So for instance, example, if a student receives a meme from another student that they felt was an instance of power-based violence, unwanted contact, things of that sort, they may want mediation and to say, I think that's really appropriate. I don't want you to do that anymore. The student may take responsibility and agree, and that may be the end of that. But our policy creates enough expansion where there's options for that. And then there's also suspension, expulsion for those more severe crimes. So more severe allegations and behaviors.
Can you point me to, in the report, is there a way to understand how many of the total 19 complaints received, or the 6 that resulted in, or the 5 that resulted in action being needed, how many of those are Title IX specific versus the more expansive policy?
We can create a process for that, and I can get with the reporting campuses to provide you with that information.
If you look at the appendices, it should, I don't know if you look at that, I don't have my binder in front of me. It should have an appendices for each system.
It does.
And then each system should have behind it a spreadsheet that tells you it was harassment or et cetera. So are you asking for beyond that?
I wonder if it's valuable just to make sure that Title IX specific falls onto the summary, the composite reporting.
I see.
I mean, I did dig into the appendices as well, and I see it, but I think it'd be valuable to bring that forward.
Regent Solomon, I understand your question now. I see what your question is. Actually, all of these are Title IX. All of these are Title IX based. So the report that the Title IX coordinator fills out, they receive reports and complaints. By the time it gets to the campus president only reports complaints. If it is a complaint under Title IX, those are complaints that are there. Those are all Title IX complaints that fall under the scope of Title IX. So we know some things may fall under power-based violence, or they choose not to have a formal complaint. These are all complaints. And a complaint, which is defined as a very specific definition under the Title IX, what a complaint is.
Okay, let's just make sure that to Regent Solomon's specific question, we follow up. If you're asking about differentiation between power-based violence and Title IX or not, but let's make sure we follow up.
mean, I appreciate Title IX is a subset of our overall power-based violence, and I want to ensure that while we can take more informal action, I suppose, with the non-Title IX complaints that are merited, I want to be sure we actually take the right action on the Title IXs if there is a limited kind of set of recourse that we should be following up on. Does that make sense?
Yes, okay.
Sorry for all the questions.
No.
No,
Thank you so much.
no, thank you.
It's very good questions.
Regent Seal.
Regent Seal?
Thank you.
No need to apologize.
Dr. Smith, we as Regents have varying and different exposures to this issue in our non-Regent lives. And some have no exposure. And so I'd like to ask you if you think it would be useful and possible to put together some redacted incident reports of actual instances where violence of this type has been reported and documented and dealt with, so that we can get a flavor for the context in which these incidents come up, the method of reporting, and the details of the complaint and the response by the institution. Obviously, this has to be perfectly redacted so that no one could tease out the identity of the complainant. No one could tease out the identity of the offender, but we would at least have the opportunity to see what a complaint looks like and get a feel for what we're dealing with here. I think that would be helpful to us, with the exception of some like Regent Levy, who was a district attorney for many years. Many of us, I think, have no experience in seeing these kinds of incident reports.
I can absolutely get with our assistants and see would they be willing to provide us a couple of examples, redacted examples of what they would, so that we know that we're prepping our board, so that they understand, for those who may not see this type of reporting each and every day, to help them understand what that could look like.
Thank you.
All right, so I think that those are great questions. Oh, go ahead. Is it Sterling? All right, Regent Sterling, go ahead.
Just thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on that example of walking through would be a great addition to our annual training. Would be probably the appropriate venue to do that.
So yes, our new responsible employee training that all board members will be required to take before by August of next year. It actually walks through scenarios and it gives quizzes on, is this a situation of power-based violence? Is this not? And it explains whether or not it is and how it fits into the policy.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
So I think in the midst of what has been asked and suggested, we do maybe kind of a board development type piece ahead of our next meeting, where we get a little bit more time and we just get a little bit more insight about that. I think that would be very helpful. I know that that the commissioner and I have talked about some other board development opportunities, but based on what we're talking about today, it might as well just be easy enough to start off with that and get a little more detail. So, Dr. Smith, we appreciate your insight. We already had everybody said aye. Anybody opposed? No. Okay. So hearing none, motion passes. Thank you all for the insightful questions and information. Next, finally, we'll hear about an update on the HBCU Advisory Council. Ms. Kauser, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, sir. Would like to start out by also thanking Representative Jason Hughes. He is the legislator who brought forward the bill that, number one, requires this annual report, and also added a student member to the HBCU Advisory Council. So this is the annual report that you all have a copy of. It is a encapsulation of all of the work that has been done by the committees of the advisory council. It also includes information about the very first election. Our first student member is the SGA president at Xavier University, Emmanuel Ucote. We have included different committee goals that have been achieved in 2021, just to pick a few out to share with you. A mapping survey of the campuses was conducted with Dr. Michael Stubblefield at Southern Baton Rouge. This is to pull together all the information in terms of small business innovation and research and federal funding for HBCUs, as well as to build the framework for a research collaborative for all the HBCUs in Louisiana. We have looked at a work group working with DOE to improve K through 12 HBCU pipeline. We have also worked with Louisiana Economic Development on some workforce ecosystem 101 regional tours that brought together partners in all of the state's regional economic development regions to share with our HBCU partners so that they knew how to access and explore methods for how to apply for certain grants and how to know who to go to for regular dialogue in terms of economic development opportunities. Had a wonderful HBCU day last year. It was hybrid thanks to COVID, as so many things are these days. But we were very pleased that the promotional materials that shared the value of an HBCU education led to more than 255,000 social media impressions. So again, this is just a high-level view of the work of the HBCU Advisory Council. With that, senior staff recommends the board to receive the 2021 HBCU Advisory Council report compiled pursuant to Act 236 of the 2021 regular legislative session and authorize Regents staff to submit this report on behalf of the board to the Senate Education Committee and House Education Committee as required by law.
Thank you. Members, you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to receive and submit this report?
So moved.
Motion made by Regent Solomon, second by Regent Perez. Any discussion? Now, I would, is there anybody who has any discussion before I just make a? Anyone? Okay. Once again, this may be very elementary, but you're gonna have to get used to that with me being chair. Okay, so, but you know, we said 8, and as I was counting, I would assume that everyone on the board may not necessarily know what all 8 HBCUs in Louisiana are. So I think it would be relevant to just kind of make that known. And of course, we have Dillard University in New Orleans, Grambling, obviously up in Grambling, Xavier, and then the Southern System. So I'm guessing the Southern System and all of its sister, agencies are there, right? So we have Southern Baton Rouge, Southern Shreveport, Southern New Orleans, and then the law school.
And Southern Ag.
And Southern Ag. Okay, okay. So everybody got that? It's counted as separate. Y'all didn't need that. I was telling you it was very elementary. I was just making sure. Now, if y'all could have named that, but you know, and only you know if you could have named all 8 of those, right? So, right? Okay, you admitted I wouldn't have gotten Ag, right? Okay. So, great. So, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you all. Next, we'll move into facilities and property. Facilities and property, our first item is the public-private partnership lease agreement. Mr. Chris Herring, Associate Commissioner of Facilities, Planning and Disaster Services, will guide us through this item.
Yes, sir.
I love hearing from Mr. Herring. That was the first committee that I chaired, and we traveled all over the state together, didn't we, Chris?
We did.
Yes, sir. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. So we received a public-private partnership and the associated lease agreement from LSU to embark on a utilities modernization initiative, which will seek to address substantial deferred maintenance in their utility systems, as well as reducing their annual operating costs for powering the main campus. This agreement is structured in such that they will issue a prime lease to Utilities Modernization LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of their LSU Real Estate and Facilities Foundation. They will in turn issue a sublease to a group called Centrio, who will be responsible for making the improvements to the utility systems at the central plant by Tiger Stadium, a satellite plant off Highland Road, as well as to fix some distribution issues that carry steam and chilled water across the campus. Centrio will use Tiger Energy Partners as the contractor for the life of this agreement. That is a joint venture between Bernhard and Johnson Controls. And the LSU will pay a monthly utility fee to cover the payments to Centrio over the 30-year term. There's multiple benefits they expect over the agreement. The first one being an elimination of over $100 million in deferred maintenance to the aging equipment in their utility plants, a reduction of the annual cost to operate and maintain their utility systems, a substantial risk in the a reduction of risk in the of catastrophic failure of the aging utility systems, and an overall reduction in the consumption of energy commodities over the life of the agreement. Centrio is going to spend just under $112 million to make improvements to these systems, and they will have to meet performance standards and indicators over the life of the agreement to ensure that LSU is capturing these savings. There's protections in place for LSU. If these performance indicators are not met, the Centrio can be assessed liquidated damages. If it's egregious enough over time, they can be removed as the operator of the utility plants during the agreement. I will say that they've used Health Science Center New Orleans has used Centrio under their previous name, InWave, for over 20 years in New Orleans with successful results. This agreement has also been reviewed and approved by the LSU Board of Supervisors, the Division Administration, and the Joint Committee, Legislative Committee on the Budget. In terms of the overall agreement and financing itself, has been approved by all three entities. I'll be happy to answer any questions about it if there are any, and if not, we recommend approval.
Hey, so members, you've heard the recommendations from senior staff. Is there a motion to approve this item?
I move for approval.
All right.
Darren Mayor.
All right. By me, Regent Mayor. Second. Second by Regent Solomon. Any discussion? This was a very hot topic for LSU. I guess just gonna run on by it. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed by saying nay. Hearing none, motion passes. So academic and student affairs.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may say just a comment.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much and congratulations. As we kick off this new year, I'm so excited to see you in this leadership position and congratulate former Chair David on all the hard work that he put forth in the past year, and thank all of you for your continued commitment. Just very briefly, thank you all so much. As you know, this is probably the largest endeavor going on in higher education. It represents millions and millions of dollars. It's been a lot of work for the Board of Supervisors through 3 presidential administrations, actually, starting with President King Alexander, interim President Tom Galligan, and now into President Tate's administration. And we are excited to deliver this to our students to alleviate all this backlog of maintenance, but also to continue to improve the conditions of our campus. So thank you all for approving this. It's been a lot of hard work over many, many years, and it will help us all in higher education with this going forward. So thank you very much.
And thank you for that comment. And Ms. Weiner, you were, if I'm not mistaken, head of the board when you all went through this process. N-Wave train, I mean, obviously, I think we mentioned N-Wave is now Centrio.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So
if you ever have a chance to go tour Health Science Center Energy, I mean, I know everybody's dying to go look at energy plants around the state, right? But the work that they have at our Health Science Center in New Orleans is fascinating. And I encourage you to, if you ever get the chance to go, how they run that facility is really, really compelling. And yes, it was several chairmen, and Chairman Damp, former Chairman Damp actually finally got this through COVID into its final form for all of us. We started in my term, COVID, many Zoom meetings with lots of consultants and learning a lot about energy that I thought I would never understand. But I also have to recognize our board member, Wayne Brown, who did just the yeoman's work on helping us all understand this so that we could really develop this agreement, which I know is unique, but I hope it's a template for other universities. I think other systems are already working on similar projects because we know our deferred maintenance backlog is one of our biggest issues in higher education across the state that we're all concerned with and need to use every tool we have to address. So the support of the Board of Regents is critical in this, and I thank you again.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for those comments. So as we move on to our next item agenda item, excuse me, academic and student affairs. Our first item is Dr. Tristan Denley. Now you all, this is our first time as a board getting the opportunity to hear from this gentleman formally in a formal setting. And we're very excited about him having joined the team and the amazing insight that we're expecting and that we feel he'll be able to bring to the state of Louisiana and the expertise. So Deputy Commissioner Denley, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for that welcome. I'm looking forward to being part of the team too, so I'm just excited to be here. So the first item is a proposal for a Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences at LSU Alexandria. So the proposed program is designed to serve students who have completed a workforce-focused associate's degree, most commonly an Associate of Applied Science degree. These associate degrees are heavily focused on technical workforce skills, such as culinary arts, oil and gas technology, cloud computing, and Louisiana's two-year institutions currently offer 151 AAS programs. They average about 2,200 graduates a year. But currently, AAS graduates who choose to go on to pursue a bachelor's degree, they're often required to take significantly more than the standard 120 hours to complete that four-year degree because the technical courses that they take as part of their AAS usually do not transfer as academic credit into those programs. So LSU Alexandria's proposal for the first time in this state will serve those AAS graduates by providing a flexible curriculum designed to accommodate those technical courses and expedite their bachelor's degree completion and of course reduce total tuition costs. So with that, the senior staff recommends approval of the proposed Bachelor of Applied Arts and Science degree at LSU Alexandria. Thank you.
All right, so we got the motion by Regent David. Second by Regent Seal. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Hearing none. Motion passes. Quick question. Obviously, you said this will be the first in the state, so this is something that we probably need to look at, try to move everywhere.
It's certainly something that we would very much like to see replicated across the state. You're exactly right.
Okay. Okay, so next item is revisions to the Associate of Science and Teaching statewide transfer agreement. Dr. Susanna Craig, Deputy Commissioner of Strategic Planning and Student Success, will present. Dr. Craig, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Temple. Wanted to just bring to you this transfer agreement. This is the result of more than 2 years of work, but really concentrated since May of this year. You can move to the next slide. Many of you are aware that in 2016, the Louisiana Department of Education, as well as the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, changed degree programs or certification requirements in the colleges of education to require a year-long residency. And what this did is require our institutions to redesign their programs. And this was back in 2016. And so as the redesigned programs came online, we began to see a disconnect between the Associate of Science in Teaching and the ability for those students to transfer directly into the four-year institutions as juniors. So we began looking at ways to revise this transfer agreement for more appropriate transfer. So the major points that we needed to change is we needed to change the gen ed requirements within the program to line up with current gen ed requirements. I think if you'll see on the screen here, there's 6 credit hours of English is what the actual minimum requirement is. The prior requirements had 12 hours of English. So we're really lining up the gen ed requirements for what every other degree program requires. We are also allowing for some flexibility in, as you can see, in the math and natural sciences. Across the state, our different institutions require different number of science or math requirements over and above the minimum gen ed requirements. And so if you had a student at a 2-year institution that wanted to go to for instance, UNO's requirement for their degree program is 9 hours of science, whereas Northwestern's requirement is 15. And so what this does is this allows the 2-year institutions to really design the program of study for their student to actually then transfer without loss of credit. The third major change is that for many years, a student graduating with the Associate of Science in Teaching had to not only pass the Praxis Core, but pass the Praxis Content exam upon exit of the AST. Well, what we're finding at our 4-year institutions is that many of their students are not being required to actually pass that content exam until either entrance of the year-long residency or before graduation. And so to maintain a fairness, if you will, we got the 2 years and the 4 years together. We had more than 7 meetings to really hash out these changes. The 4-year institutions requested that they did not even want the students taking that content exam until after they got to the campus and were able to take some of the courses at the 4-year institution. And so what you're seeing here today is the result of the negotiations between the 2-year institutions and the 4-year institutions. In addition, this information has been shared with SATSE, our State Articulation and Transfer Council, and all are in agreement that this is the right way for us to go. Next slide. So if there are no questions, senior staff recommends approval of the proposed changes to the Associate of Science in Teaching grades 1 through 5 transfer agreement between the Louisiana Community and Technical College System, Louisiana State University System, Southern University System, and the University of Louisiana System.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do we limit the flexibility of a teacher if we take away some of the requirements on math and English? What I understand we find is we get a teacher, say in a high school somewhere, And they may not be qualified to teach some of the courses that they're asked to teach because they have to go fill in, not just in science, but say you've got a science teacher who could go teach some English or who could teach some math. If you reduce the hours for training in math and in English, do you limit the ability to use those teachers in different classes?
Just to bring attention to the fact that this particular transfer degree is only for an elementary teacher grades 1 through 5. So it is not for your, say, a high school math teacher that may or may not be able to teach a high school science course. So this is only for grades 1 through 5. Why
wouldn't that apply? Suzanne, why wouldn't that apply there as well? I mean, if you had a teacher teaching the 4th grade and they were teaching some of the applied sciences or the general sciences or whatever, but you needed them to also teach English and math, which we historically rate very low in, do we take away the qualification or certification of that person to teach that in those schools where they're needed?
At this point, sir, no, because of the way that teachers are certified at the Louisiana Department of Education. Our colleges have to sign an assurance that the students, their candidates are meeting the competencies as identified in Bulletin 776. And that's the content is all lined out in that, and they provide assurances through the coursework that they offer at our institutions that they are actually meeting those competencies. In addition, at the four-year institutions, they are allowing for flexibility. So if you can go back for me to the previous slide. Thank you. So what we have done here, sir, is actually line up with what the actual gen ed requirements are. The current gen ed requirements in our state are the lowest number that you see right now. The gen ed requirement for mathematics is just 6 hours. So we are actually encouraging that some of those students, they can have up to 12 hours of math. So we're not saying that, we're not really limiting the math and the science. You can see we're going up to 15 hours of science in that course. What we're saying is if a student is at one particular community college and they know that they are headed to UNO, let's just say, for example, and UNO's program of study includes 9 hours of credit. In our previous program, they would have taken 15 hours of natural sciences. So when they transfer to UNO, they have 7 extra courses, which are great. I agree with you. Those science courses would be great, but then that is going to extend their time, their 4-year degree, because of those courses then have to count as elective credit, because at that particular university, their requirement is 9 hours of science. Does that make sense? And I'm certainly happy to talk with you offline more about this, but that is not going to limit an elementary teacher, say, being able to teach a content at an elementary school.
And be certified.
And be certified. That's correct. These are all within the current certification guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so members, you've heard the recommendations. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Move.
Regent May.
Was that Regent May? All right, motion made by Regent May, second. All right, Regent David, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed by saying nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Next is planning, research, and performance. Our first item will be presented by Malene Baker. Hopefully I said that right. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair Temple. I think I heard a little bit of audio, but I think we're good to go to the next slide. And this morning, we're introducing the report in response to House Concurrent Resolution 19 of the 2021 regular session, authored by Representative Brass. In your board materials includes the entire report. And today we're going to be including some of the research and the recommendations and overview of that full report. But to begin, this task force was comprised of 18 members, various stakeholders from both public and private post-secondary institutions. This task force had representatives, athletic directors to a private sector HR officer, so a very diverse task force and representation from throughout the state. And the legislative charge of this task force was to create those best practices for minority applicants to have exposure in the hiring process, specifically for those athletic director positions as well as head coach positions. So if we go to the next slide here, you'll see a timeline of the work of this task force. This task force met 5 times, and in those meetings, it looked at those current trends in diversity and inclusion in collegiate sports and identified issues as well as the recommendations that Mr. Logan will share momentarily. And at its first meeting in August of 2021, it elected Mr. Brandon Logan, who serves as the executive director for the Doug Williams Center at Grambling State University, to serve as the chair of this task force. And so at this time, I will now transfer over to him to give you some of the research, the work, and the recommendations of this task force. Mr. Logan.
Thank you, Malin, and good afternoon, Board of Regents, and thank you, Chair Temple, and members for this opportunity. As Ms. Baker stated, we went through the last 5 months intentionally looking at ways to answer the charge by Representative Ken Brass. And I believe after today, you will come to the agreement that we have found some universal solutions that could work for the state of Louisiana. Now, within the state, we have 26 institutions that have athletic programs associated with it. We opted to focus on 13, which were all NCAA affiliated. 12 of those institutions are Division I and 1 Division III, which is Centenary. If you wanted to understand the public and private makeup of the 26, we have 20 that are public institutions and 6 that are private. 2 out of the 13 are private, which is Tulane and Centenary College in Shreveport. Just to level set, we also put a specific focus on sports that had a common theme throughout those institutions that we're studying, and that is football, softball, volleyball, men and women's basketball, soccer, women's soccer, men and women's track, and men and women's cross country. There's a full listing of the task force members listed in Appendix A, and then also a full listing of the schools that were represented in this examination in Appendix B. What I'd like to do is to shift into the state data that we had analyzed during the summer of 2021. We also have provided you with some of the NCAA stats so you can do a comparative analysis on how we are performing at the state level versus the enterprise level of the National Collegiate Athletic Administration. So as you can see on the screen, as of August 2021, we had 62% of the athletic directors in the state were white and 38% of the athletic directors were Black. We also examined the assistant AD because typically that is a pipeline for the AD track, and we want to understand what that pipeline currently looks like. 77% of those assistant AD positions were filled by white individuals and 23% were filled by Black individuals. As of August 2021, the state had 38% Black NCAA athletic directors. All of the athletic directors in the state are men, so 100% are men. I also want to bring to your attention, if you can go to the next slide, please. We wanted to dive deeper into the role of the head coach from a gender and ethnicity makeup. So if you look at the men's sports, 97% of the men's sports are led by males, and 3% are led by female. And conversely, on the women's side, 66% are led by males and 34% are led by females. So understanding this information, this data-driven information as our baseline, the task force are really charged to identify pathways for us to consider on how we can improve the diversification of our members when it comes to consideration for these positions. And so each task force member was charged with answering a big, bold question. And I'd like to read those to you verbatim. The first question is, what is the most innovative strategy we can create and implement to improve our diversity talent pipeline in Louisiana sports administration? The second question that was raised was, how can we support people of color and women in athletics to ensure retention and advancement? So this was our guide. This was our charge by Representative Brass and his colleagues in the state to ensure that we created a solution that not only the Board of Regents could rally behind and support formally, but also at the state level as well. So over the 5 months period, we have worked down to 4 formal solutions and recommendations that I would like to present to the board today. The first one is to provide awareness training to reduce unconscious bias. And the awareness training is not something that we believe should be done only once a year, but rather it should be an ongoing process that helps to really fill the gaps that each member institution in the state is dealing with. And really what we're trying to achieve here is to normalize discussions around bias and prejudice, leading to changes in long-term behaviors and perceptions. We believe that is a very integral first step to resolving some of the diversity challenges that we face in the state. The second working group focused on eliminating job description language that can negatively impact a candidate pool. The task force discussed the critical role that job descriptions can have on promoting cultures of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of these recommendations came from the professional level of the NFL team, the New Orleans Saints, as well as the NBA team, New Orleans Pelicans. What the NBA did specifically for basketball, professional basketball, was to issue a license to every NBA team with a tool named Textio. And what we're hoping is that the state can replicate this within our athletic institutions to use Textio to help with the elimination of job description language. One of our task force members really raved about the value and the transformational element that Textio has had in their hiring practices. And provided that we got that legitimate information in practice from the Pelicans, we felt this was a great recommendation to move forward at the statewide for consideration of implementation. The third working group focused on creating a system and process to review applicants and resumes blindly. There are specific steps that this task force is recommending, and I'd like to read those to you. Number one is to neutralize job descriptions by removing exclusive language from all descriptions and postings. Number two is blind recruiting. We would like to implement a recruiting software to remove identifying information from resumes and applications. For example, Textio, as I just recommended to you all from the previous subgroup, or include instructions for candidates to do so prior to submitting an application. Number three is phone screening. If phone screening is a standard practice, then we'd consider coupling it with a questionnaire. Fourth, social media scans. To remove biases, these scans should take place after the phone screening and before the initial in-person interview. Number five is to conduct an in-person interview. And number six, as needed, is to incorporate affirmative action, meaning if 40% of applicants moving forward in a search process are not women or people of color, review applications to ensure at least 40% of those interviewed reflect these groups. And lastly, we want to ensure that all employees throughout the state are enrolled in ongoing unconscious bias training. And the fourth recommendation from our fourth working group was to standardize the interview process to eliminate unstructured interviews. At minimum, vacant positions are required to interview with the following individuals. Number one, the hiring manager. Number two, the sports supervisor or unit supervisor who is not the hiring manager. Number three, the human resources manager or another member of the human resources team. And lastly, at least one other athletics employee approved by human resources whose position or experience is relevant to the vacant position. Now, within this standard process, we have also outlined some exceptions to the hiring process. Obviously, in the state of Louisiana here within the last 60 days, some of these exceptions were enacted, so they may be familiar to you. Number one is an emergency hire. Some examples: when normal processes are not practical and filling a position quickly is necessary for recruiting processes. The other one is when a vacant position needs to be filled because the relevant sports competition season is imminent. And lastly, when filling a position quickly is necessary for the safety of the student athletes during off-season training. The second exception, is the candidate has particular notoriety. When a candidate is nationally or internationally renowned and well-respected in the profession, when a candidate has a history of winning championships at the NCAA conference and or professional level. The third exception is unique qualifications. When a candidate possesses multiple educational credentials coupled with an extensive experience that serves to benefit the department. And also when a candidate is multidimensional and has a history of making a positive impact in the industry on a national or international basis. And last exception is internal promotion. When a candidate is currently an employee within the athletics department and a position change is necessary or desired. These are the 4 formal recommendations that we are presenting to the Board of Regents. In addition to these 4 recommendations, we are also expressing approval for a diversity, equity, inclusion pledge and promise. This is also listed in detail in an appendix. You can see it on the screen. If need be, I can read it verbatim, but the intent behind this is to create a spirit of cooperation as we start this new year, is to ensure that these institutions that have athletic programs can really set a new tone, whether it's NCAA, whether it's NAIA or the National Junior Athletic Association. We all have opportunities for the pledge and promise. And so the intent behind the pledge and promise that this task force is recommending is that we start with the system presidents, our 4 system presidents throughout the state, to sign and enforce this. And as a next action is for each system president to then look within their own member institutions to have them to sign this pledge and promise. And the goal is to have the executive staff of each institution to sign this pledge and promise. And not only to sign it, but also to take action and uphold these pledges and promise on a daily basis. And we would love to see this permeate throughout the state, whether you are serving in athletic capacity or not. We hope that the private sector can get on board as well. And again, that we can create this culture where diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just tolerated, but it's embraced. And this becomes a great practice for the state as we begin to set the tone. I will close by saying that the state of Oregon in 2009 had established a similar framework for mandates when it comes to interviewing and hiring. But since then, no other state has gotten on board. We're taking a little different approach in how we believe that we can improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and really be a leader in this space throughout the country. And we hope that you all will see the nuances in our work and our approach versus what you have seen probably nationally within the Rooney Rule of the NFL, which just made some recent adjustments on how to strengthen their process. And of course, the state of Oregon's legislation in 2009, which I believe you have a full copy as an appendix as well. With that, I will pause for questions and answer any question that the board and its members may have.
I have a question when I'm recognized.
All right, so Regent Ewing, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I appreciate this good report, and I think we're certainly working toward a more equitable situation for all of our people to apply for jobs. I'm not clear on the second provision there about the job description. Can you show shed a little light on that? Don't you have to have a standard job description in place?
Yes, Regent Ewan, what we're proposing is not to eliminate the job description. What we're proposing is to eliminate certain language within the job description that could work adversely to particular applicants. And the software Textio.
Can you give an example of that? Do you have an example of that?
You know, some of the language, and I want to go back to what we've established in the report just to maintain some consistency without an anecdote. But there are certain languages that could be prejudiced towards certain groups, and we want to make sure that we can remove that for.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. I just come from business, and I don't know anybody that applies for a job that doesn't have some kind of job description. So I was just asking for a little clarification on how you're going to go about that. You don't want things in there that create a bias. I certainly understand that, but I did want to know that we would have some kind of standard job description of what is required of a person that's going to get a position, and you feel like that is intact.
Yes, sir. And one of the things that we're trying to eliminate is the unstructured process of hiring. Oftentimes, individuals hire those that they're most comfortable with instead of establishing a formal process. And with Textio, as I shared as an example, what the NBA team, the Pelicans, have found is that Textio has really helped to identify some of the implicit biases that were established in their job descriptions. And again, if they're really trying to create a fair, equitable process, want to take these recommendations on eliminating certain languages that could serve as biases. And so what we're trying to recommend is what we believe is a strengthening component to the job description versus weakening and or eliminating it.
Thank you.
Regent Perez.
So my question has to do with what incentive institutions would have to sign the pledge. And then as a follow-up to that, what actions would we be able to hold them to? Don't want to use the word enforcement here, but what actions would we be able to hold them to in terms of whether they signed the pledge or not? And if they do, what are they doing about it?
Great question, and that's part of the differences between what we're recommending and versus what Oregon has instituted. And I believe that the incentive process versus the mandate is the best approach to take. I would like to work with Representative Brass to better understand at the state level how this process can be incentivized. Our task force is very limited in our scope of what we could recommend. And didn't have quite exposure of where the latitude and opportunities are to incentivize the process. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a governing authority that would have greater power and control than we would have to ensure that we have cooperation throughout the state. And I just don't know what that looks like in practice at this time. But I'm hopeful with the support of the Board of Regents and also in working in concert with Representative Brass and his colleagues that we can create a format and a formula that would be beneficial for all concerned.
Thank you. And then one more question. You noted that there were no women athletic directors across the state. Are there any women assistant ADs or chiefs of staff or senior associate executive directors, anything like that in the leadership pipeline?
Yes, absolutely. And so there are several assistant ADs and would be happy to present that to you in a draft email of outline who those assistant ADs are. But at this time, as we were examining the head coach and the AD roles, there were no women in the athletic director role.
And in Louisiana, at these institutions, do we break out men's athletic directors, women's sports athletic directors, or the ADs? There's just one for all men and women's sports.
In most instances, an athletic director covers all men and women's sports.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Go ahead, Regent Solomon.
Mr. Logan, thanks so much for the report. So it struck me, I've got some concerns about it that I want to ask you about. First of all, we saw the slide earlier today about the volume of reports that we have to produce. I'd love at some later point to talk about the resources and the time and the money that goes into these. They're all very valuable reports that we produce for the state, but I also feel like sometimes Regents, because we are so good at doing them, we get a whole heck of a lot of them, and I want to make sure that we talk about that. But with regard to this one specifically, we assembled an 18-person task force that's incredibly competent. And so thanks to everyone who worked on it. I guess what struck me is that a lot of the recommendations, to me, the 4 recommendations really, I imagine, would apply to a goal of promoting diversity, women candidates, and minorities in any leadership roles. And that the suggested, 4 steps that we take in terms of how we implement it regarding athletics, I would hope are being applied across the board in our institutions for all kind of roles, ensuring that we are doing implicit bias training, ensuring we're writing job descriptions in a way that attract the widest pool of candidates, ensuring that we're taking those rigorous steps you outlined. And I guess my question would be, are we sure, first of all, that these are actually new methods that would be implemented? And if so, maybe my question then goes to Dr. Reed is, do we have a higher level issue if these kind of HR standard practices aren't being implemented across the board in our institutions, not just for athletics, but for the wider goal of promoting diversity and more equitable hiring in all of our leadership roles throughout the state?
It's an excellent point.
It is an excellent point, and it is an important one. We have, as you know, talked about through our master plan work, the importance of opportunity, equity and opportunity. And as a result of that, we talked a bit about faculty diversity, leadership diversity in our state. So we are a state that has, as Regent Perez pointed out, no women ADs, but also no public post-secondary women four-year presidents, not enough diversity in faculty. And so there is a full range of issues that we need to address collectively. And while the legislature asked specifically about this, your point is an important one. We need to socialize this across our state around all of higher ed, not just athletics. I think the membership is a positive because you see the system presidents were at the table. And so they do the hiring. They do the hiring of athletic directors. They do the hiring of faculty or support that as well. And so I think this does allow us to socialize that. We are hiring more chief diversity officers in the academic area across our campuses. And so this is a nice springboard to a broader conversation that you pointed out. Where are the opportunities and how are we being intentional in supporting more talent development and more leadership development across our institutions?
Do we have any sense of why Representative Brass focused in on the athletics issue specifically, as opposed to a more wide-ranging conversation about the role of diverse candidates
and everything? Now, I think that any answer to that would be speculation.
Fair.
Number one. Number two, so I'm going to speculate, okay, that athletics is in many cases, especially in the southeastern part of the United States, and is the doorway in many cases to a university. I mean, we looked at since that guy that left Michigan State to come to us and then left us to go pro and then came back to Alabama, that guy, right? Name not said, right? Alabama's enrollment has absolutely exploded. Sure. And they're getting a lot of people from Louisiana as well. So in speculating, and I will call, Representative Brass myself and ask, but I would assume that was probably the impetus behind him bringing that up. So
I think it's a great point. No doubt the athletics plays an important role in the cultural identity of schools as well as the recruiting nature of it. I guess the question I'd have, Mr. Logan, is when there are organizations like boosters or athletic foundations that are involved in the hiring and the funding of these roles as well. Did y'all talk at all about, to the degree that that dynamic changes the hiring process, and what our expectations of being able to, I don't want to use the word enforce, but kind of like Regent Perez was asking, implement this? Or does the role of boosters and athletic foundations kind of give a workaround to this? Because I imagine in many cases, these roles are more largely funded through that than through the state general fund.
Without a doubt.
Did y'all discuss that, Mr. Logan?
Without question, and thank you for the question. That was really central to our third recommendation on the hiring process, and really trying to shift from an informal process to a formal process. Establishing these multi-step recommendations that we believe will create those guardrails and separation between the boosters and organizations that are trying to influence the hiring process. Again, we're trying to create an equitable space where individuals that are qualified can apply and feel safe and feel like they are getting a competitive opportunity for these positions. There are many of instances, as Chair Temple recognized, the individual that traversed from Michigan to Louisiana to Alabama, that perhaps did not go through a formal process. And there's exceptions that we have noted to recognize that, but there's also other candidates that we believe are being set aside because they lack the notoriety, but have all the competence and the skills necessary. And we want to make sure that that inclusion is a part of the hiring process. So in short, we believe that we are creating guardrails in more of a formal process that will allow us to begin to make progressive steps in this area that, quite frankly, will not get improved overnight, because it has been in this way for several decades.
My last question is around these exceptions, and this is the one that struck me the most with concern. When I look at the 4 exceptions and then the total of approximately 8 or 7 bullets under them all, I'm hard pressed to imagine a scenario where one of those exceptions and criteria might not apply. And my concern is that all the good work of this 18-person task force, and with the name of every one of these members of the Board of Regents on this report, then creates an extensive list of loopholes to following the process. And I'm deeply concerned about trying to identify, when do we think that any of these 4 exceptions would not likely apply? In the case of internal promotion, no doubt. The idea that a unique qualification is someone who possesses multiple education credentials concerns me, that when the work of this group is to break down equity barriers, that maybe the pathway for diverse candidates or women to have multiple credentials automatically puts them at a disadvantage, and therefore someone who has those credentials can bypass the process, or someone that has respect in the profession. Of course, I hope we're hiring respected professionals, but it would seem to me that once again, we would then look at a slate of candidates that perhaps don't have such notoriety and respect, and automatically dismiss them because we have a candidate or someone we know that has great notoriety and respect, who more likely than not, according to the statistics you showed us, is not a diverse candidate and likely not a woman. So I guess my question to you on behalf of you as the representative of the task force today is, when do you think these 4 exceptions would not apply?
So I'd like to answer it this way. I think one of the critical elements for us was to have a documented process. So even if those exceptions were established, you still have to follow the documented process that was put forth with the hiring manager, the sports supervisor, to make sure you have an assembled working group to document and justify why you are enacting one of these exceptions. What's also been expressed, and I did not orally state this, but within the structured process and exceptions, the task force acknowledged that all positions should be assessed annually as a part of the institution's performance evaluation program. Additionally, the process should be reviewed annually to determine the appropriate use of exceptions. So this is going to be an ongoing basis. What we tried to establish was a baseline for engagement to ensure that we have a formal process put in place that allows us to understand how we're doing in 2021, moving into 2022, and what adjustments, if needed, are proceeding in 2023 and beyond. So you have a valid concern, one that we all share in, but if we took no action, then we could not move forward to improving the situation of the state. And so these are what we concluded was the best steps for our task force to recommend to the Board of Regents today.
So, Regent Solomon, if you're finished with your train of thought.
Definitely finished. I apologize for my long train of thoughts.
No, that's okay. You prompt us to have other concerns. And one of the things that I had looked at when I read this was that the House concurrent resolution lists who the members of the task force should be, right? That was nobody that we had anything to do with selecting, but when I looked at the actual names of the members, I struggled to see how many women were represented on that task force. There's only one obvious name that's female, but maybe you can help me with that, Mr. Logan. How many of the 18, how many were women?
Well, through proxy, we actually had 5 women that were actively involved. And one of the opportunities I had as chair was to appoint 3 individuals from the private sector. 2 were women and 1 was a male based in New Orleans. And so understanding that the piece of legislation was really assigning individuals by position and not by name, it created another opportunity for us to recognize by position who occupies these roles.
Right.
And so as our opportunity was to take advantage of my appointments to ensure that we had more women that were involved in this process to engage. And so as an example, members that were assigned through the legislation to participate gave their proxy to women as opposed to their participation. So we actually, in terms of engagement, had a good amount of women that were actively involved in making these formal recommendations for the task force that are now presenting to you all today.
So we had to do that by proxy. We had to be intentional about that because organically they would not have been members of the task force, correct?
That's right, because the task force through the HCR 19 was assigning participants based on position that they hold in the state.
And so the extent to which minorities, aside from women, were included that are obvious to me were only 4 of the 18, or were there more than that?
For women?
For Blacks?
We actually had more Blacks than 4.
6.
6.
7.
7, yes.
7.
And so that was nearly half of the task force.
Okay, I feel better about that then.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think we have Regent Weil and then Regent May. Regent Weil, you there?
I am here, but I didn't raise my hand or anything.
I apologize. You don't have
It's
to come up with a
okay.
question.
I'm happy to speak.
No, it's I think we try to get through it, but if you do have a point, by all means, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask on the awareness training, I didn't hear you say who would undergo this awareness training that in this document.
Yes, so I know that there was a focus on athletics, but we want universal cooperation. And so this would not just be towards the athletic department. This would be for every institution and its executive team and staff to go through unconscious bias training for greater understanding of the implicit biases that may exist within the current system and how they can uproot those to ensure greater cooperation and more of inclusive practices moving forward for each institution.
All right, thank you. So Regent May and then Regent Pryor.
Yeah, just a couple comments. And first of all, echoing Vice Chair Solomon's comments on the potential for the exceptions to be a loophole that's constantly used. I think that really good work in putting this together, but just a concern over how that could be used to go around this. The other thing I would note, and just a question for you, Mr. Logan, is on the interview panel, it sounds like we're being fairly prescriptive on what that panel would be. One of the things we do within my company, it sounds like a lot of the practices that are being recommended here, but having a diverse interview panel, I think, is very important because it allows that group to see different things within that candidate. And I've experienced that since we've adopted that. I think it's really important. And just noting a concern, to the extent we're prescriptive about who is on the panel, it may, in a way, create a barrier to having a diverse enough panel. So having diversity around gender and racial is, I think, critically important in that process as well. Really, that's my 2 comments.
Thank you, Regent May. So Regent Pryor?
Yes. Okay. I thank Regent Solomon for his comments. I think they were very much what I was going to say, was that the exceptions perpetuate the good old boy network. And that's what I assume the whole task force was supposed to try to prevent or prevent that sort of hiring. And as Regent Solomon pointed out, those 4 exceptions, I believe there were 4, give every exception in the book to make these just words, these task force recommendations. Now at the midway through says, I pledge and promise to recruit and retain a staff that more closely reflects the diverse makeup of the communities and where we serve and live. And that sounds good, but you're telling who are you pledging and promising to? Because if you're at Grambling or Southern, a lot of your staff is African American. And does that closely reflect the diverse makeup of Baton Rouge or Lincoln Parish? So you have to be careful with the words that are well-meaning, but are a double-edged sword when you're trying to do good in one area or make a change. Those words can also wind you up in some litigation on the other end. So what I don't see in this, and one of my best friends from my playing days at Vanderbilt is the athletic director at Northwestern University. And I'm not talking about the one in Natchitoches. So he's gone to the highest heights in Big Ten athletics. And other people I know that have been the athletic director at Georgia, African Americans, Damon Evans, Dr. Derek Gregg. There's an African American athletic director at Auburn University. And all of their careers began, the athletic director at Southern University, who I grew up with in Shreveport, Roman Banks.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these men's careers began with internships. And that's what I don't see in the recommendation. And athletics is a get your foot in the door business. And the best way to get your foot in the door when you're a young person interested in that career is through an internship. So that's the big hole I see in your task force recommendation, is a pledge and promise to create and maintain paid internships for those young men and young women who are interested in a career in coaching or administration. Thank you.
Good point. Well, that's a phenomenal point, man.
Regent Pryor, if you don't mind, one of the things I just wanted to share with you that this on page 5 of the report, pending the completion of this work, the Doug Williams Center is prepared to support developing programs to teach interview techniques. Also the internships, as you talked about, creating clinics for coaching that talks about public speaking fundamentals, recruiting techniques and strategies, contract negotiations, organizational leadership and motivation. So there's multiple components to this work as opposed to just presenting this as a document that will then live on the shelf. This is active. We will have continuing education, create opportunities for greater engagement all the way at the internship level, all the way up to the executive leadership level for greater preparedness in these roles.
If there are,
Finley?
oh, Regent Finley, go ahead, ma'am. This is a very active conversation. Mr. Logan, you have become an absolute superstar with our board.
Appreciate the discussion. This is very important work.
Regent Finley, do you have a statement or question? Okay, all right, well, we'll move forward. So I actually, during our robust
I have a question.
communication, go ahead, Regent McDonald.
Yeah, so number one, I appreciate Mr. Logan, the work you've done on this report. I would be interested in, did any of the presidents of the universities around our state or athletic directors, were they involved in these, in, you know, coming forward with these recommendations? Are they aware of it and working with you and the committee?
Yes, Regent McDonald, if you review Appendix A, you can see a full listing of those individuals that participated. Everyone that you described was a participant and an active one at that. So we had system presidents, we had athletic directors across the state that came up with these solutions and recommendations for today.
Right, that's good. Does this, do these recommendations, you know, certainly I'm for diversity and equity, and I think everybody on our board's for that, and we've worked toward that. And we're making a lot of progress, I think, in our state. Does we have a historical Black college and university system in our state, and then we have the other system. At the historical Black college and universities, will these recommendations be in effect? For example, if there are very small percentage, say, of white applicants or white that are in positions at these universities, will these apply to people interviewing or when you're recruiting to diversify the staff of historically Black college and university?
Yes, so this is a universal recommendation, not just specific to predominantly white institutions or HBCUs, but across the board. Again, we have 26 institutions with athletic programs and athletic leadership that we hope to have a positive impact on with these recommendations.
Right. The only point I'm making is I would like to look at both. We seem to have two systems here, and I want to make sure we're being fair with everyone, that applicants, no matter which system they're applying in, would be given the appropriate consideration and would be hired on merit. And that's what we want for everyone. You know, the best qualified person should get the job, and regardless of the color of their skin, or ethnic background, so forth. That's what we all want. And I just wondered if we're going to implement this task force recommendations, is it going to be at all the schools? And could we come back in a couple of years and find out, hey, you know, these recommendations has resulted in this happening in this system and in this system and so forth?
Yes, I'm in agreement. The objective would be to implement across all 26 institutions in the state that have athletic programs and review this on a reoccurring basis, not just to make these recommendations and hope for the best, but to ensure that we have enforcement and key measures in place that are monitoring activities, behaviors, performance, et cetera. But I think it all comes down to, at the state level, what type of incentivized process can the legislative body create? You know, formal recommendations is one step, but I think the incentives at the end of the day is going to be critical to the success of our recommendations.
Right. And as the presidents of all the 26 schools that we're talking about, universities, college, have they reviewed these and endorsed them, or have they had a chance to do that yet? Or will, if we implement these, will, I don't want to get feedback that, hey, I didn't know about this, or I didn't have input on this. We just want to make sure that everyone has had appropriate input.
Regent McDonald, so the first step was the Board of Regents for approval. If everything goes to plan, the system presidents would then take this report and distribute among their member institutions so that everyone would have access. As of now, the only institutions that were named in the task force have been exposed to this work. Board of Regents is the next organization and entity that has been exposed to this. So everyone has not seen the details of the report, nor have they seen the pledge and promise.
Right, and that concerns me. And Mr. President, we may want to look at a motion to defer until we can make sure everyone has been informed and educated on these recommendations. I'm very supportive of most of the recommendation. I should have been reading them before this meeting in depth because they're very important. And I think they need very close attention and very before the board adopts them. And we in a Zoom meeting, and it just doesn't seem as appropriate in this type setting and this type meeting to adopt some task force recommendations that the universities will and colleges will have to implement without making sure everybody's reviewed them. And Mr. Logan, we appreciate the hard work because somebody's got to start and somebody's got to put together some recommendations, and we appreciate you and your task force for working on this, and just want to make sure everybody's informed and everybody's educated as to how we're moving forward. And then lastly, I just want every college and university to implement these. And when we come back with our reports in a year or 2 years or so forth, to see are we moving forward in every college and university in openness about jobs, because I think anyone applying for a job in our state or in our colleges and universities ought to be considered on the merit and qualifications for that job. And we're not concerned at all. I'm not, and I hope our universities aren't about their ethnic background or the color of their skin, because we're in America and we're in a great state here in Louisiana, and we just need to make sure that where everybody is treated fairly and equitably in everything we do. So thank you very much for your work. That's all I have at this point.
So, Mr. Logan, first of all, I want to do as several have already done and commend you for leading this charge. I've had communication.
Chair, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt if you're going to close out. I did have a comment and a question.
Is that Regent Finley? Go ahead.
This is Regent Finley. I had my hand up earlier, but Regent Perez actually made a couple of the points that I wanted to make. I wanted to follow up on Regent Levy quickly and Regent McDonald. I agree with Regent Levy that these ought to be processes and procedures that we do in all aspects of hiring and higher education. And I agree with Regent McDonald that inclusion and diversity, but inclusion mainly should be a part of the hiring in every athletic department as well as part of the universities. But we have to have some historical context into this too. When we speak to, will this be implemented in historically Black colleges and universities? That's not really been where the challenge has occurred. These historically Black colleges and universities were created because individuals could not go to other universities. And the hiring issues that we see that permeate, jump in, Mr. Logan, if I'm incorrect, primarily are happening at other universities that are not historically Black colleges and universities. And so while it's true we want to be inclusive at every university, I think the issues that you really see in terms of hiring and making sure that individuals have a chance to be a part of the athletic departments, and they should be at any athletic department, but the issues and the problems and challenges that we see with diversity, equity, and inclusion are at the universities that are not historically Black colleges and universities. And the numbers bear that out. And so I commend you, Mr. Logan, for the work that you're doing and the task force is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Finley.
Great point, Regent Finley. And so go ahead.
Yes, am I on? Is prior again.
Of course.
Okay,
I know your voice, even if I didn't see your head, your shiny bald head.
And I do want to say, Doug Williams is a personal family friend. My dad was the captain at Grambling football when his brother was the captain of Grambling's baseball team. So we go way back, and I applaud the Blue Ribbon panel and Mr. Logan's work. I think what Ms. Finley said it more articulate than I was trying to say, that the problems are with the non-HBCUs on these type of mandates. I do see our pledge and promise to enact a strategy that increases the participation of diverse populations. I'm just saying that I would like to state, that you guys should look at our pledge and promise to create internship opportunities and be direct, because that's the way for someone who's doesn't have a family member that's been to college, that has no idea. They know I love sports. I would like to make this a profession. You have to make them pledge and promise for programs, put money into for internship opportunities so people can get their foot in the door, and then they can go on to these high dollar careers that some people have in the athletics business. Thank you.
Great point. And so, Mr. Logan, I've communicated actually with several athletic directors just during our robust conversation, and even a couple of presidents, all of which, several of, I'm talking about people that are on this list, were extremely supportive and positive about this so far. I would like to ask the commissioner, I think Mr. Leon Tarver, representing the SU system, has a statement question. Dr. Tarver, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I've been following this discussion, and it's been an excellent one. And I want to comment on the issue that Dr. McDonald and Ms. Finley has both addressed. I did not assume that these recommendations were designed to supplant the existing policies and laws of the state with respect to fair and gainful employment in any category. Mr. Logan, is that correct? Again, Mr.
Yes,
Logan,
that is correct.
Yeah, my sense was I was trying to embrace both what Dr. McDonald was suggesting, and of course Ms. Finley, as well as of course incorporating Mr. Pryor's recommendation. I thought that these recommendations were excellent, and it was to cover all institutions, but I did not assume that it was going to supplant any of those things. So I didn't see the same conflict perhaps Dr. McDonald saw in whether or not these things were going to jeopardize the current fair standard and legal standards we have in our employment laws in the state of Louisiana. So I didn't see that same conflict.
That's correct. Appreciate that comment, Supervisor Tarver. The context, I'm going to make sure I understand the context. So the context, as you all know, is that the legislature asked Regents as the state's coordinating board to convene all the system presidents, athletic directors, and others to wrestle with this issue of how do you diversify the talent pool, both women and minorities. So our job was to convene this group. And so I want to make sure, to Supervisor Tarver's point, that the Board of Regents is a coordinating board. We do not hire faculty, presidents, coaches, athletic directors, but we do have the ability to convene those who do hire to say, give us your best thinking. And that is what this report represents, the best thinking of the system presidents and others. And so while I'm more than happy to have us relate to the legislature in a cover letter or however you would like, some very specific points that Regents raised around exceptions, Regent May, diversity of the hiring pool, Regent Prior, internships, the power of that. I want to make sure I put into context to Regent McDonald's point. We are not binding campuses to these set of recommendations because that is not our role. As coordinating and policy board, it was our role to convene the system presidents to ask them to wrestle with this issue. And the report recommends that represents their thinking about how to do so. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And the other point I want to make is we think about HBCUs and predominantly white institutions in totality is all of our institutions have work to do when it comes to more women and certainly minorities. And so I don't see a differentiation between one group having more to do than others. There are not enough women and minorities collectively. And Regent McDonald, that minority would be whoever is the underrepresented person at that institution. So just a few points that I wanted to clarify, but again, we're not binding the campuses. We convened the system presidents, all 4 of them were represented on this task force to ask what was their best thinking. And so we've been asked 60 days before the legislative session, which I believe is in the next 2 weeks, to transmit the report to the legislature. And so that was our assignment.
And so may I make a suggestion that what we do is we move forward as we've talked about and maybe kind of put some flags for the legislature.
Sure.
Okay. So if I can kind of maybe adjust the motion, but can I get a motion to receive a somewhat amended report and submit it accordingly? Is that a motion that can be made?
Be amended, or are we going to make a letter?
No, I mean a letter. Yeah, a letter with flagged letter, just kind of making some specific points, some areas that they may need to look at a little bit closer. Is that something we can do? Okay, so
and more than happy to transmit it to you.
That would be great.
Make sure we reflect what your points are before we send it to them.
Okay, so can I get a motion for us to move in that capacity?
Yeah, I move to receive and submit the report, and with the caveat that y'all can have a cover letter explaining whatever aspects you need to explain.
Great, motion.
Second.
All right, great, that's perfect. So thank you, gentlemen. So that's a motion made by Regent David and a second made by Regent Seal.
Mr. Chairman, could we be CC'd on that letter?
No, most definitely.
Okay.
We will definitely be every.
Send as a draft to the board.
Correct.
And then
So
once we get it finalized, then send over and CC to you all as well.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the commissioner for centering us up after that discussion. We all saw different directions to go into and to follow up on, and we all created assignments for ourselves to fix these problems. And the commissioner reminded us that our real power as regents is the power to convene.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that. So having collected the information, our task is to forward it, not to fix all the problems that are suggested by it. So
there you go.
I appreciate that centering up, Commissioner.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Seal. I think that's what we're here to do right there. What we just did, we definitely convened. That was a significant convening. So any further discussion, any further convening? Okay.
Only that, I think that our discussion, the discussion that generated around that goes to the fact that this board does not rubber stamp.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So no, without a doubt.
And I'm very grateful to have had such valid concerns echoed by the regents that spoke. So I appreciate that.
Without a doubt. And I just want to say this, and this goes for everybody. I'm saying it based on what Regent Solomon, Vice Chair, said. Never apologize for the gifts that you have, that you are bringing to this board. That's the reason, that's a great deal of the reason why you are here, and your insight and your thought and your questions add significant value for us to be able to move forward and do the work that we have been tasked to do. So that's for you, but that's for everybody.
Thanks.
All right, so thank you for that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right,
Aye.
opposed by saying nay. Okay, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you so much. At this time, I would ask the commissioner to provide her report. And so I get the distinct honor, my first time as chair of bringing Commissioner Reed to the floor.
Thank you, Chair Temple. Congratulations to you and
Thank
the
you so much.
leadership. So excited. Hopefully you all had a great holiday, and we are off to a great new year. Regent Perez, I appreciate your point. I was texting with Meg about how thoughtful and great this board is, because you bring your best thinking, your in-depth questions, your thoughtfulness, and so we're better because of that. And so thank you for that. We certainly enter a new year with the same old COVID challenge. And so we are very much focused on a safe return to campus. Some students are returning this week, next week, the following week. So we did convene, as we are in our 5th COVID surge, we did convene system presidents by Zoom with Dr. Cantor, Dr. Sokol, Kimberly Hood from the Department of Health to talk through what do we know about Omicron. What are the recommendations? How do we mitigate, and how do we make sure we educate safely? So we know that the 18 to 29-year-old population is outpacing many when it comes to positivity. We know that Omicron is much more transmittable. Luckily, at this point, appears to be less deadly, less lethal, but very much transmittable. And so how do we think about transmissible? How do we think about keeping students safe? So all the system presidents have committed to keep the mask mandate in place. Additionally, Southern, Loyola, and Tulane are delaying their start for a couple of weeks until later in the month. LSU, Baton Rouge, LCTCS plan to keep their start, but some of them are doing hybrid. So they're doing a little bit of online for the first couple of weeks. So you'll see a little bit of variation in how campuses are responding, but all of them are centered on student safety, mask mandate, and keeping in real time up to date on what's happening with this virus. So we're trying to, as you know, push our best work to be a convener, as Regent Seal said, of critical information, share best practices, advocate for student safety, and persistence in getting that credential no matter what. So we're grateful certainly for the healthcare heroes that are in the field on this fight, those who we will continue to graduate, and certainly to the scientists who are continuing to work hard to get us to the other side of the pandemic. So more to come on that work. The next slide, we were very happy to have the U.S. Secretary of Education visit Louisiana. I had a chance to share with him our master plan, get a copy, and talk a bit about our focus on increased educational attainment and our transformational focus. So I appreciate him giving some time to Louisiana as he visited Glen Oaks and other K-12 schools as well. We had a chance before this surge to host our student workers at my home for the holidays, and it's always special because they're from undergrad to law school students. So we get to talk about how are you doing? How can we better support you? And what's the learning that's happening so we can continue to support our students. So that was special and fun. We have some great news to share when we talk about FAFSA and the work of LOSFA. As you know, we have been the #1 state in the nation for FAFSA completion for a couple of years. And you see here that we are outpacing the nation when it comes to year-over-year changes for the FAFSA. So we are very excited that even a pandemic and other things are not keeping us from making sure students are filling out this form that allows them to get access to federal aid, to work study, to loans and other things. And my congratulations to the LASWA team and the schools and everyone working hard to keep students on track no matter what. Congratulations continue when it comes to Blake's Stomping Grounds, UL Lafayette. They have been designated at R1 by the Carnegie classification. So ULL joins LSU and Tulane on the list of the top 137 universities recognized for academic excellence, elite research, innovation, and global impact. As you know, they're doing phenomenal work in child development, water management, participated strongly in the Pfizer work on COVID-19 vaccine. And kudos to Dr. Samwa, who sat in this chair, as you know, as commissioner and supported me in my work as a young professional. And kudos to all of his team there in Lafayette and certainly Ramesh for their great work. Just very proud of them. Finally, as we talk about phenomenal women in athletics, I have to share a great moment. I had a chance at the invitation of Dee Bro, LSU legend, and Kim Mulkey, another absolute legend, to visit with the LSU women's basketball team in the locker room after their game with UL Lafayette. So I had a chance to share my journey, hear from them about their journey, and then, of course, take some phenomenal photos, hugs all around, and just so excited to see their success as student athletes. And how do we think about supporting these young women and men who are doing phenomenal work as student athletes? The time management and the work, as you know, Regent Temple, that it takes to be an elite athlete is significant. And so I just wanted to make sure to share this happy moment as we think about and talk about how to diversify and get phenomenal women in our coaching and our athletic departments across our state. So with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
That is phenomenal. That's very exciting as well. And if I just go back to a couple of slides before, where you were with the Department of Education head, backing us up. You see Glen Oaks High back there, and I was made aware, was not aware. Regent Philip May is a Glen Oaks Panther, so he gave a shout out during the chat to Glen Oaks. There you go, Regent May. I went on and just did that for you. There you go.
Great to see him back.
There you go. It is very good to see him back. But no, guys, I mean, obviously, and I just reiterate, we have a commissioner who is all over the place at the same time. It was, I guess, the year right before COVID when she went into the prisons, and the Department of Corrections said that a commissioner had never, commissioner of the education had never done that, had never thought it was necessary, considered that population of folks who are coming out and need to be reintegrated into the rest of the community. And one of the best ways, if not the best way to do so, is doing so through education. The fact that she saw that and took advantage of that. And so I think that is just a great example of making sure that, of looking at every opportunity to get to our goal. Does that make sense? Of credentialing as many of our folks in our state as possible. So that being said, thank you for that, Commissioner. Members, is there any other business to come before our board today?
Can I make a statement, please, or
yes, sir.
Point out something? I've been reading the book that we were given last month, The Great Upheaval, and I certainly do appreciate that. You know, this is really the third time we've been kind of told that we need to start looking down the road in a visionary type way. When we went down to Nickel State and we had those presentations, it kind of came up with the fact that 70% of the jobs that are going to be needed to fill in 2030 aren't even created yet. Then we get that book on human work. I really encourage all of our members to read this great upheaval, and particularly the last chapter. And I would like at some point in time to see an agenda item in which we had full discussion on where we are in this great picture of where we're going in the United States and everywhere else in higher education. It does call to question where we are, where we're going to be, and how effective we will be at producing the students or the people in the workforce that can in fact support our economy. Stepping back, it also triggers the question, what must we do in addition to what we're doing to make our master plan come into fruition? I would just like to recommend that if you haven't read that book, and it's the kind of thing, it can put you to sleep, but it also, there are some wonderful points in there that are well researched, and I encourage everyone to read that book. The other thing that I'd like to mention, and it's certainly at play right now, we need to do what we can to support this broadband program. We had an excellent presentation last time about what we have, the money we have, and I do think we must have a really good guy in charge of that. But up here in the north part of the state, right now, with schools closing, backing up, taking into consideration COVID and everything else, there are so many children up here that have no access, none, to a Zoom meeting or to use the internet to carry on their studies. You can say, well, you can go to the library. You know how hard it is to get some of these children to the library. Their parents are either working or absent. So we need to do what we can to support that effort. And I believe that man, I believe his name is Leininger. He gave a good presentation. Those are just 2 points I'd like to make, Mr. Chairman. I sure would like to see an agenda item that we were able to evaluate where we are in the world of higher education right now and going forward.
Thank you so much for that, Regent Ewing. You're making me feel real good because at your point, Beneath Iinger was actually, I have a meeting with him this weekend, and that was the gentleman that was talking about the broadband, to actually have a conversation about that exact thing. So Regent Ewing, obviously I appreciate that insight, and that just shows that I'm moving in the right direction. So everybody, that being said, any other comments? Okay, our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, February 23rd here in the Claiborne Building in Baton Rouge. We're planning a one-day meeting. Hopefully we can have, we won't have to be hybrid, but obviously we will move accordingly and we will let everybody know. Doreen will make sure that you know exactly where we are. So you all put the 23rd on your calendars, and I move for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Regent Perez, seconded. Regent Solomon, any discussion? Hearing none. Aye, opposed nay. Hearing none. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.